Hello everyone and welcome back to Booster Blaster Build Part 4. In the last episode we were trying to get the explosion prefab to work so that when the ship hit an obstacle it would explode. I wasn't quite getting it to work, I don't think. I only recorded it yesterday and I already forget, but we're going to continue on and see how I do. So in the last episode I was saying that the reason it wasn't going to work is that I have it in the wrong place. So I'm actually doing it when you get to the finish line, it's going to instantiate an explosion, which is not what you want because you don't want to die when you hit the finish line, because that is the goal is to get to the finish line. So killing people when they get to the goal is a bit mean even for me. So this is where it should be going. So if you're on something that's tagged as friendly, like the launch pad, nothing happens. If you get to the finish line, you should load the next scene. Otherwise, if you hit anything else, you will instantiate an explosion. So I figured that out at least, so that's good. We're off to a good start. So I can't see any problems with getting the explosion to work now. It should be quite simple. If you hit anything else, instantiate the explosion, destroy the game object, and then load the new scene after 1 second, which would be reload the first level. So it should work, right? It should absolutely work. I have faith. I have confidence. I have faith. I know this will work. So let's see it in action and see what it looks like. So we fly up, we hit an obstacle, and nothing happens. It should work. It's supposed to work. Why isn't it working? On collision enter, if it's tagged as friendly, if it's tagged as finish, otherwise anything else. Instantiate the explosion prefab. It's on the rocket ship, so okay. So it wasn't destroyed, and it didn't invoke load new scene, which is this one here. Nothing happened. Why? It should have worked. I am recording this a little bit later than I normally do, so I've just noticed how dark it is. Hello. But it gets bright when I bring back on Unity, because Unity is white. So the rocket game object doesn't have an explosion prefab on it. Well, that could be an issue. How can it instantiate an explosion if it doesn't have an explosion prefab? See? That is my original rocket. I'm not using that anymore. I could get rid of that. So this rocket game object... Oh, this one has an explosion prefab. Right. So that's the explosion prefab. This has an explosion prefab. I'm going to mess with some settings just, because I'm here. Increasing the drag basically increases the air resistance, so it will change how the ship moves. So I get hit, and I'm stuck, and nothing happens. This is turning out exactly as I expected. Normally, if things don't work, what I would do is debug.log or print something in the console, making sure that it's actually calling these lines of code. Or I run off to Google or YouTube to try and find something to help me. So we're not invoking the new scene. We're not trying to destroy it. Well, I mean, if I delete that, that's what's going to happen. Yeah, so we're just going to see if we can get the explosion to work first, and then we can try add in the other stuff, like destroying the ship and then loading the first level again, reloading the level. Always solving problems. That's the way it is. Oh, I get squished. And nothing happens. Yeah. Because I'm playing in full screen mode, I can't actually tell if really nothing is happening. I've had an issue when I'm instantiating particle effects that, even though I say to instantiate them at the position of the game object, that they actually instantiate somewhere else within the world. So I'm not quite sure why that happens. It takes a while for me to figure out how to fix that, and I never really remember why. So that could be happening. When I hit something, it could be instantiating an explosion anywhere else in the world, which I would only know if I had There we go. See? It's doing it over here when I hit something. And it's also taking in the rotation of the object. Okay. So the code is working in so far as it is instantiating the explosion. So it's not doing it. My guess, and this could be where I run into these problems. So I'm resetting the transform of the rocket ship. Because what I'm trying to do is, I feel like it's the position that is causing a problem, but it would be the position of the explosion prefab, not the rocket ship. Because I think what I've done is, where I drag in the explosion prefab onto the rocket ship game object, if I drag it in here from the hierarchy, as opposed to here, this will have its own transform. So it'll have its own positions. So it'll instantiate it with those positions. Whereas if I reset those positions to 0 and then apply that to the prefab and then bring the prefab in with 0 of its own position, then it should do it at the position of the game object. Because I think if it already has an existing position set, then when you do it at the game object position, you're kind of adding the game object's position onto it, so it makes it appear somewhere else. I think that's the issue. So you can see it does have its own position there, 26.863.6. So what I would probably need to do is set that to 0, or I don't even need it in the hierarchy because I'm instantiating it. I just need the prefab. So this would need to have a 0 transform. I think that's my issue. Just based on what I know now that I may not have known then, and the fact that I've had this issue a lot of times when instantiating game objects and particle effects and explosions and stuff. So I think that's it. But I don't know. And I don't know how long it will take me to figure that out. If I figure it out at all. I'll figure it out eventually. I always do. And it is just, you've got to work at it. So you can see it is instantiating explosions. Every time I hit something, a new one is created. So over here, it's just not doing them in the right place. So they're appearing with their own transforms. Probably in relation to the parent. So if it's taking the parent as 0, 0, 0, and then the x-axis was minus 26, that would come out here. I think that's right. If anybody knows, leave a comment below. Let me know. Am I right? Am I wrong? Do you know what could be causing this? Because I have had to do the instantiate stuff this year, and I had a huge issue trying to get a laser effect for a rifle to work. In that it would either appear in the right position, so it would appear in front of the gun, but it would move off in a random direction, or it would move in the right direction, but it would be appearing somewhere way off in the world. And that took me ages to figure out. So I bring in the explosion prefab from the prefabs folder as opposed to having it in the hierarchy. Does that help? If it still has its own transform on the prefab, it will not help. It is still creating them. Yeah. But it's not even creating there anymore. 0, 0, 0. So it's creating them in world 0, 0, 0. Which is, they're appearing underneath the ship then? Is what I would have to assume. If I hit the ceiling, I'd probably see them appear. But I can't because I'm obviously rotated the wrong way. I can't even fly up. But when I try to focus in on them, they're appearing. Oh, they're appearing in the right place. They're just not playing because playing awake isn't up. Ah, yes. Because if you wanted to play as soon as it instantiates, you need play on awake. You don't need looping. No, you will need play on awake. So you'd need to tick this. I don't want to delay. because that would mean that when it instantiates, it would wait a certain amount of time. But play in a week. Because I'm just instantiating it and I want it to happen immediately, I'm not calling it in any other way. So it has to play in a week and play once. So hopefully, kaboom, kaboom. So that's working. That's what I did. I figured it out. So I zeroed out the transforms and I had it play in a week, and that seems to fix the problem of it not working. It's not a brilliant effect. And my ship is still rotating in ways that it shouldn't. But at least now when I collide with anything that's not friendly or finish, the explosion comes in. So we've got that. So then we'll put back in, destroy the game object, and invoke the load new scene. Seeing as we know that the actual particle effect is working. And we'll see if that works. Or I'm actually doing, yeah, and that's quite clever. I'm doing it one line at a time. So I know that I now have the particle system working correctly. So when you collide with something, it explodes. Now I want to see if will it also destroy the game object. And it's not. It's not. So I need to fix that. Whereas if I had to just put in the destroy game object and load new scene, I might not have noticed. Or they both might not have been working, and I might only have fixed one. So it's always good if you're having problems, go line by line. Solve one problem at a time is kind of the way to do all this. So I die. This should be destroyed. But it's not. And I need to go back to the code to figure out why that is. Destroy this dot game object. That might help. I don't know. You could also get rid of this. You could just destroy game object, and it would be the game object that the script is attached to. So that could work. This might be a way of fixing it. Let's see. Yes. It works. It destroyed the game object, but now I'm having the issue that it's destroying the game object before it can instantiate the explosion. So, I mean, technically it should run line by line, so it should. But if it's instantiating the explosion as a child of the game object, then when the game object is destroyed, all of its children will be destroyed, which means that the explosion particle effect will be destroyed before it can play. So I'd have to do it as a separate game object, or I could then just create a whole new function that would say destroy this game object and load a level. So, or two functions, create another function that would be destroy game object, invoke that after, but then the ship would be seen. So a better way would be to just turn the game object off, I think. But that might still affect the children. I know there is a line of code that says like you can put in here as game object, but sometimes that doesn't work, and I'm not quite sure how that works. Sorry, not here. Here, instantiate. Explosion prefab. So I am going to try and do a void. So my own function for destroy the ship. So we're going to basically take this line of code. Destroy this game object. And again, I don't need to have this. I just need to destroy game object. Just to make the code simpler. So I'm going to invoke this after a certain amount of time. And then I can invoke this, after a certain amount of time. So destroy the game object once enough time has passed for the explosion to have happened, and maybe 0.1 of a second or half a second after that to reload the scene. So I'm giving it half a second to destroy the ship, or for the explosion prefab to happen before the ship is destroyed. So kaboom, and it disappears. But it also got rid of the explosion prefab, so that blinked out the explosion effect before it was finished, which is not ideal either. So one of these days I'll have a video that I put up where I don't have any problems and everything goes smoothly in the way I expected and I get everything to work. But not today. Not today, I'm afraid. Today is going to be another hour of me struggling to get this to work. Because if you remember, I couldn't get Cinemachine to work. So I decided to try and get, in the last video, I took a break from Cinemachine and I moved on to Input Manager, cross-platform Input Manager. And I couldn't get that to work, so I decided to try something that should be relatively easy, which is just getting Explosion Prefab to work. And now I'm on having problems with this. So instantiate the Explosion Prefab. Again, you don't need this. You could just have transform.position or and then you could comma the rotation, add in the rotation. There's a few things that you can add in that can work. So hopefully I get to figure this out. I don't know where all those came from. Another one that will take up more than one of my recorded videos, because I actually had a quick look through the videos that I have left, and I might be able to fit everything I have left into this one video because some of them are quite short. For example, this one is 3 minutes long, so not that long. So now I'm going to the obstacles, and I think what I'm trying to do is then, because I'm not going to destroy the obstacles, I'm going to try and get it that if the player collides with the obstacles, the obstacle is what will instantiate the explosion at the position that the player has hit. The problem with that is that only the moving obstacles have the script on it, which means if you hit the floor, the ceiling, or any of the walls, or any obstacle that doesn't have the script on it, it won't do it. Now, I could put the script on all of them if it works. So my guess would be that in 4 minutes I didn't get it to work. So we're going to say that if the player collides with the obstacle, we're going to do something. And we're still trying to get that explosion in and the explosion to work. And I'm trying different things, and this is the way I've said this in many videos, and I'll keep saying it because it's true. So this is the only way that you can actually learn, is that when you're having a problem, you got to try different things, and eventually you'll find something that works. And it's a valid idea to have the obstacles be what causes the explosion, because then I don't have to worry about destroying the rocket ship and the explosion disappearing. I then just have to worry about reloading the level after enough time has passed for the explosion to happen, and that's an easy thing to do. But if I leave that on the ship and the ship is destroyed, that line of code will never work. So I'd actually have to have it on the obstacle as well. So then the obstacle becomes responsible for instantiating an explosion and then reloading a level, which is not something that an obstacle should do, really. Because if you were trying to, if you know it's there, it's fine, but it's not very intuitive. So let's say, like, I was working on this last year, so if I didn't have all these videos and I went back to it during this summer when I had time off college and I wanted to go back and work on it, and I was saying, oh, well, there's some issues with the explosion being instantiated, or there's some issues with the level being reloaded, I want to tweak that, then I would assume that would be on the player script, because that would be where I would put it. Now, only having a player and an obstacle script, it's not that difficult to find it. But if this project had more scripts and got bigger, it might then get difficult to find things if they're not in places where you would expect to find them. So I'm just going to comment out this. So basically, I'm splitting it up. So if you collide with the obstacle will instantiate the explosion, but the player is still responsible for killing itself. But when it collides, so that's not ideal, really. You'd want them all in the same place. And it is possible because I've done it. I just honestly can't remember how. I feel like that's the right way, instantiate it. So there's the problem. This is one of the things that didn't have the script. We're just going to pause here before this video ends. So the player hit it, and the player did kill itself because that's what's on the player script, is that if it hits anything that's not friendly or finish, it will destroy itself. But no explosion happened because this doesn't have the obstacle script on it because it doesn't need to move, so I just had it there. And that is the problem with having them split between two different things. Now, as I said, I could put the obstacle script on everything, but it's not necessary, and there is a way to get it to work without doing that. So, this is the third of my recordings. This one, we're going to go on for 28 minutes. So that's not bad, and I think the next one's half an hour, so we should actually fall right within the hour mark, and that is the last of the ones that I've done over the summer. Did loads of work, as you can tell. And we're still trying to get the explosion to work, so we're now back in the player script. We're invoking destroy ship after half a second. We're going to change that to 1 second, just give it a little bit more time, that's fine. But the player needs to be responsible for causing the explosion to happen. It's not a good idea to have it on the obstacles. So what am I going to try next? Game object set active to false. Like I said, that it just turned the game object off. That's a good way to do it. So instead of destroying it, you just basically switch off the game object, which just means that it's invisible. Then we're going to invoke. What do I need to invoke now? Invoke. Load new scene, probably. Load new scene. So if I'm setting it to. If I'm turning the game object off, I don't need to destroy it, really. Because if it's turned off, it's not going to take up any computing power, it's not going to render anything. It's. As far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong if you know in the comment below. So yeah. So I don't know if you can tell. So I hit it, game object turns off, and then the scene reloads. So that works. You can see it better here. So this is the game object. Gets hit, that gets turned off, and then the scene reloads again, which collapses all this down. So that's working. But as I said, if you're going to reload the scene especially, then you definitely don't need to destroy the game object as well as turn it off. So just turn it off, then reload the scene. Oh, and I hit an obstacle and no explosion. So interesting why that's not working. And if you're curious, oh, there was an explosion, but it was turned off because interesting. So even though the obstacles are creating the explosion now, it seems like it's still being made as a child of the player. And if you're turning off the player, you're turning off all of its children, same as destroying it, so that's not working. You can instantiate things as separate game objects at the position of an object, and I know it's possible, and I've done it recently, and honestly, I think it's the same as what I'm doing here, or at least it's so similar that I'm just making a tiny little mistake. So collision.transform, so that is the transform of whatever is colliding with it. Because if I had to put game object.transform, it would have put it in the position of the obstacle, and it would have put it at the center point of the obstacle. So it wouldn't be in where the player hit. It would have just been in the middle of the obstacle. So I think the only thing that I have that I can remember that I put into recent scripts for this same kind of thing is that I had it on the player, so I didn't have this collision.transform, but I had game object.transform.position, game object. And then either game object.transform.rotation if I needed, like for the lasers where I needed them to actually have the proper rotation. But if for an explosion, you could also just have quaternion.identity for the rotation. and that seemed to work. They came out as not as children of the player. They came out as their own game object, but they came out at the position of the player, which meant I was able to turn the player off and still have the effect play out. And then I just had a script on them that would either turn them off or destroy them after a while, so that it just didn't have a load of just particle systems in my scene. Even though they weren't rendering anything, it was just, just get rid of them anyway because I don't need them there. So collision.transform.position. Okay, so vector 3 explosion is equal to, so the position of the collision game object, that's the vector 3 we wanted to do. We want to instantiate this explosion prefab at the explosions vector 3. So you can see I kind of know what I want to do. I'm just not entirely sure how to do it. And I still run into these problems. So, I mean, that shouldn't make a difference because the explosion is a transform itself. I mean, nothing's ever easy. You'd think stuff like this would be fairly straightforward. And I guess it kind of is when you know how, like everything else. It's easy once you know how to do it. But even still, I have struggled with this recently within college stuff, within the college assignments that I'm doing. So I just need to remember what I do when I got it to work. And when we get to those videos, when I get to those videos, if anybody is watching this and then watches those videos, remind me in the comments below to actually, look at how I got this to work, because I need to remember that for the future. As I said, I could just go back to these videos and watch them again and see how I got them to work. So I'm trying to instantiate. So here's a fix. This is what Unity is suggesting. Do a void for instantiate game, and to avoid instantiate, put in a game object, the explosion prefab, at a vector 3. I don't understand this, because you're making it a function. You're going to pass in that, you're going to pass in that, and then what, we're going to call this when I collide? I mean, that's basically what I'm doing here. Instantiate explosion prefab explosion, that's this line of code. So is that calling this? Is that what that means? That I'm calling this here? Well, this isn't going to work because I have to have two different... I've told it to expect these, so I can't call it without these things in it. So I need to pass in the explosion prefab and the explosion, because that is what it wants. And the explosion. So this is the vector 3. No, this is the vector 3. This is the prefab. So this is the explosion effect, and this is the position that I wanted to appear in. Explosion. It's not liking that. Why? The name explosion does not exist in the current context. Is that what it's saying? But I mean, it does. Oh, it doesn't, does it? Vector 3 explosion, did I? Oh, I don't know. We're gonna try it anyway. I don't expect it to work, and probably didn't expect it to work back then either. Oh! Although, if we pop that down again, it looked like an explosion prefab was created that wasn't a child of the rocket ship, which means that it kind of worked. Rocket game object. So when we hit play, yeah, it created its own. It created its own object, but it's not working. So the best way to test that would be to stop the player from, stop the level from reloading, so that I could pause it and then focus in on where that explosion was and see why it's not playing. Now maybe it's just being instantiated again off in the world somewhere. Vector 3 explosion. Explosion is a vector 3, so bool instantiate in world space. That I believe would also stop it from, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't stop it from being a child. The name explosion does not exist in the current context, but I have it passed down here, and it's a vector 3. But I think unless I have it set up at the top, which I can't remember if I did. I know I wrote vector 3 explosion somewhere, but if it wasn't up here somewhere, maybe I got rid of it. So I would need to state that what the explosion, because this is just saying it's a vector 3 explosion, but it's not saying what vector 3 it is. So I need to say explosion is equal to the, which I did on collision, so I'd actually have to have it here somewhere. Or, I would have to have it there. Explosion is equal to the transform of the thing that exploded with it, the game object that not exploded with it, the game object that collided with it. And that will tell it exactly, because this is just saying that it is a vector 3, but it's not saying what the vector is. So there's no points, there's no position points. So I figured that out, and I'm trying to say down here it's equal to the object that collides with it and that transform. But you can't do it here. It has to be done on the on collision, because that is where you get information from collisions. That's why it's called on collision enter. So when something collides with it, you get all that information here. Again, I'm going to try it up here. That's a game object. I don't. Okay, so I'm getting the player. Interesting. So the explosion is equal to the player's transformed up position. That is an interesting way of doing it, and that should work. So I'm just going to, in the inspector, I'm going to drag and drop the player into it, and then the obstacles can actually access the transform of that player, so the position of it. So that's one way to do it, and not a bad way. Again, I'm trying to figure out how to get it done on the obstacles, even though I don't think that's where it should be done. But if I can get it to work on the obstacles, then I should be able to get it done on the player. I just need to figure out how to instantiate it so that it's not a child of the player. And it seems like I've done it, even though I'm not exactly sure how. I don't know why just adding in the, instead of just saying position, having transform, or instead of just saying transform, having transformed up position, I don't see why that would make a difference. So there's an explosion there. There's an explosion there. What was the last thing we did? Oh yeah, explosion is equal to explosion is a player that transformed up position. Instantiate the explosion at the player's position. Okay, and then you're doing, well, I'm not calling that up here. I mean, I'm expecting a position. I don't know why it's letting me do it when I tell it that it needs to have two things here, and I'm because I have two things here. I think this and this. I don't really know what this is doing. So I'll need a comma for first of all. There we go. And it doesn't exist in the current text because I'm saying it down here that the explosion is equal to, so anything that's not within this function doesn't know that the explosion is equal to the player that transformed up position. That's only for anything within here. If I wanted this to make sense for the entire script, I would have to put it in above the update and start functions. Or I could put it in the start function so that it says when the game starts, this is what the explosion is, and then anything after that can use it. But that is something that I've learned this year that I did not know last year, Or maybe well, it's been explained better this year. So at least I know that. So yeah. I would still like to have a video one day where things go right for me. I think that would make it a little bit more fun. Although seeing people fail is kind of fun sometimes, isn't it? It makes people feel better about themselves. Except for me, of course, because I'm the one failing. Oh, yeah. But we carry on. Live and learn. So I guess now I'm just trying to think, what else can I try? What else do I think might work? What else have I learned that could possibly get this to go the way I want it to go? So the explosion is equal to player dot. I mean, the way I had that was correct. That was fine. You can make the explosion be equal to the player's transformed up position. It's not going to matter as long as it's only within this particular function. It would have to be outside this function to matter for any other functions within the script. I mean, even if I did it in here, because this is where I need it. Like, if I don't need anything else to know that the explosion is equal to the player's transformed up position, I only need it on collision, then I can set it here, and then no other script can access it. No other function within the script can access it, because they don't need to. So that's, I don't know if that saves on performance, but it's something we were told to kind of do to keep your code clean. So we're gonna fly. No, we're not. What are we doing? We hit play. We're gonna fly. Explosion happens. Oh, I think I saw an explosion there. Yep, there it is. Which is interesting. So it's appearing at 0, 0, 0. So it's appearing at a 0, a vector 3 of 0. And that's probably because I have not, in the instantiate line of code, I have not set a vector 3. And I've not done it in the player, so it's in the obstacle script. Save changes, obstacles, yes. If I didn't save it, then the script wouldn't have worked. So I'll try that again. The name explosion does not exist in the current context, but it does. No, I mean, it does, but it doesn't. Because I put it in the wrong place. So interesting. So then, theoretically, if I got that out, the explosion is equal to the player.transformed up position, and I got that into the correct part of the script, and then instantiated the explosion prefab with the explosion vector 3, it should create it at the player's position as its own object. So the way it is now, only in the correct place. Theoretically. But will it? But I mean, it should, and I think it will. I just need to move that line of code out. So I'm going to put in just a vector 3. I could put in any vector 3. See, vector 3 explosion is not going to work because this function doesn't know what this function is saying, and this is the function where I'm saying what this is. So a very simple fix, but one I didn't know at the time. So because at this stage I didn't realize the kind of the importance of where you put things in the script. It does matter, obviously. I mean, it seems obvious, but I didn't know anything last year. I was only learning. I was only a game dev babby. And now I'm a game dev toddler that thinks he knows everything, but when the shit hits the fan, I gotta run to the adult and be like, help me. So I'm gonna just try player.transformed up position maybe again. Which, I mean, is the same thing. I mean, if I just put player.transformed up position there, it's the same thing as as using explosion, because the explosion is the player.transform.position. So I could do that. It is, yeah, because I have the player set up here, so I could just get that. I'm going to get a new vector 3. Okay. I'm going to call it, okay, so I'm actually setting the explosion up here. Player dot player prefs? No. Yeah. And again, this is about the importance of you can set a thing, you can set like a vector 3, you can set a float, you can set any of those variables here to things that Unity will recognize, or to things that you can assign in the inspector. But the reason it didn't work is because I'm just declaring that there is a player here. I would have to say, and because I assigned that in the inspector, right now this player is nothing. So I'd have to say, like, I could just have vector 3 explosion and then start explosion is equal to player dot transform dot position, and it will go to where the player is in the inspector, and I'll have assigned it there already. So it will take that player, take the transform, and it will do that. At the minute, this is also just a blank vector 3, so it's just a 0, 0, 0, same as it was everywhere else. So this is not going to make any difference. But I'm slowly getting there, I think, and I hope that you can see that is that step by step, everything that I try is slowly getting me closer to. See, explosion is equal to player.transform.position, which means that this line of code can be deleted. Even technically, even that could be deleted. I don't. But we'll see how this works. So that cleared the error. Then we fly up. Nothing happens when you hit the wall because it doesn't have the obstacle script on it. But if I was to fly into one of these things, we should see an explosion happening. We don't need that, as I said, because I've moved it up here to where it should have been all along. But all those steps helped me get to that point, to understand and realize that that's where it should be. So valuable mistakes made, valuable time spent checking things and working on things and trying things out, and eventually I don't think I've realized yet that because it's on this script it's not going to work on the walls or the floor or the roof, but I'm sure I'll cop that eventually, hopefully in the videos we have left. But it'll be interesting to see what I try to do to fix that, because maybe I'll figure out some other ways to do things. Because, you know, trial and error, you can figure out things you never thought of and find ways of doing things that you never would have thought of. You weren't playing around with all these different things and trying to fix problems and mistakes and stuff. So there are no mistakes. There are only learning opportunities. That's what I believe. So this is completely unnecessary. This whole function. This is all I need. This on collision, if it's the player that's colliding with it, you instantiate that explosion. That's all I need. So just fly into that, please. Just do me a favor. Just don't. He's only learning. He's only learning. Don't get too mad at him. He's only learning. He's only a baby. Sometimes I just want to slap him on the face, though. Yeah, change the name of the function. That'll help. Call it the explosion function. Yeah. Issue with that is that the explosion is only being set here. Now, instead of because I moved it up. But just copy and paste. Just copy and paste. Or cut it out entirely. So that'll... So what's your issue with it there? Can I convert Unity Vector 3 to a transform? Interesting. So it has to be transformed up position. So you're looking for a Vector 3 to a transform, so... no, well, I mean... No, so then I think, so transformed up position is the Vector 3. So the instantiator is looking for a... cannot convert Vector 3 to transform. Okay. But the transformed up position is a Vector 3. Is it not? Or should that be a capital T for... No, it's lowercase t for transform. Interesting. I feel like I give up pretty soon and move on to the next one. I wish I could remember what I did in between these. So I've spent pretty much half an hour in this past video. And I stop recording. So what do I do when I stop recording? Do I go off and look things up? Do I just take a break from the computer? I can't remember. But then when I come back, I think I don't. My phone is always listening to me. That's very strange. I don't even know why that opened. I wonder. I wonder. So I'm not figuring this out. It's not the explosion prefab, but it needs to have a position. Where is it going to instantiate it? Well, I'm trying to just call it here and say to do it there, but I think I'm making this more complicated for myself, and something I've learned from doing all this, because I've done it a lot, especially this year, and I've gone back over scripts and stuff and looked at them, and I have no idea what I need anymore, because I'll add in things like this, like a Vector 3 or a public game object, to test them and see if they work, and when they don't work, I'll move on to something else and add something else in, but I won't take the things that don't work out, and then I end up figuring out what works, getting everything to work, and I go back to the script, and then I can't remember what relates to anything and what should be deleted and what I don't need. So the more you add in your testing, the more complicated your script looks, and the harder it can be to figure things out, because then you don't know what everything is or what it's for. So it can be, it's a good idea if something's not working. If you try it and it doesn't work, delete everything that you tried that didn't work, and then move on to something else. Even if it means that you have to re-add that same line in again, and just use it in a different way, just delete it so that you know that that's gone. Otherwise you end up with massive scripts that you can't read. And while they work then, and you can go, okay, well, it's fine, I've got all this stuff that I don't use in it, but it works, so it's cool. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. But then if you continue on and add stuff into the script, and then something breaks, and you go back and you look at the script, then you've got all this stuff that you can't remember what it's for. You don't know which bits do stuff and which bits don't. And now you're trying to find a problem in a script that is unnecessarily large and difficult to read. So that is just my own personal tip from stuff that I have done. So I think... Oh. So this is... Okay. So that popped up Booster Blaster 9, so I think there's one more video after this. So this, I think, bear with me while we check. Yep. I just checked. There was one more video than I thought, and it is another half-hour video, which this is a half hour, so that means I've got 1 hour left, and we are already at 50 minutes, so that's kind of good enough for this one. So I'm going to end it here. So if you like the video, hit the like button, share it with people you think might be interested in the content, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon so that you can be notified of all the cool upcoming content that I've got coming out, and we'll see if I can ever figure out how to get this damn explosion to work properly. Okay, thanks very much guys, and we'll see you